Hi everybody, it's Violet Kitty, and this is a response to the Atheist Antidote regarding the TV show Lost. Now he has a bunch of questions, and while I am by no stretch of the imagination an expert on Lost, in the last year I've had quite a bit of time on my hands, and so I have watched a lot of Lost. And I think I can answer most of these questions fairly cohesively. Keep in mind, this is strictly a TV show and it's strictly fantasy. So everything that I'm saying is just conjecture and nothing more. Okay, on with the video.
Needless to say, I wasn't thrilled with the finale, although, you know, there was some tender-hearted stuff that went on, and of course you're attached to the characters if you're a fan. But ultimately, I wasn't a very big fan of the finale. I thought they took the easy way out.
Brock, I agree, they did take the easy way out, but one thing we have to remember first and foremost is that this is a business. ABC has invested the last 6 years giving us entertainment at no charge to ourselves in hopes that they would more than recoup their losses in advertising, and if they were truly successful, create an opportunity for an excellent movie franchise. And that's basically what the ending did. It created opportunities with a lot of loose ends for, I can think of probably at least 10 different movies. So that's what's going on there.
Okay, the Asian guy who could communicate with the dead. His name's eluding me right now, which proves I'm not the greatest fan in the world. But why could he talk to the dead, and why is that relevant to the overall arch of the show? And I just don't understand why he has this power. It's very interesting, of course, but I don't understand how it fits into the puzzle piece that is the Lost Jigsaw puzzle.
Okay, you're right. You are not the greatest fan of the show. His name is Miles, and he is the son of the lead research scientist at the Dharma Initiative there on the island. The father's name is Pierre Chang, but he actually had a couple different names during the course of the show. Like he had a different name when working for the Dharma Initiative than he did once he was no longer with the Dharma Initiative. And so exactly what his name is, I'm not entirely sure. But Pierre Chang was his name. One reason he had strange abilities, and it wasn't really the ability to speak with the dead, but to understand the last thoughts that a person had prior to their death, and only if he was in physical proximity to the actual body. Miles was conceived and born on the island, as was Charlotte, the redhead anthropologist slash archaeologist. She was a little bit of both in the various realities. And then, of course, Daniel Faraday was conceived on the island, but apparently Eloise left before he was born. All three of these, who formed the away team from Charles Whitmore's freighter, had some real special abilities. Miles was the ability to sense what happened when a person died. Daniel Faraday was extremely gifted in music and mathematics, which, of course, if you understand music and mathematics, they're extremely closely intertwined. And in the real reality, as a young child, his mother said, "No more music for you, you are going to pursue the sciences." And he became a quantum physicist of incredible giftedness, and which, of course, tied him in. And then Charlotte had an extreme affinity for archaeology and or anthropology, one of the two. All three of these had incredible giftedness, but it's also what led them to be extremely vulnerable during the time flashes. And since Charlotte had lived more on the island than either of the other two, that's why she died of brain hemorrhage in the time flashes.
You have to have asked yourself this question. What happened to the boy Walter? He seemed like a big character. I know they had some problems with him hitting puberty and eating too many vegetables and growing up to be Shaq and everything, but I don't know what happened to this guy, and they made such a big deal about it, and they just never, ever even addressed it again. And I thought for sure that they would, so any thoughts on that?
Well, the obvious answer is that Walt did grow to be quite tall. He was more likely probably about 12 playing a 10-year-old, and so when you hit puberty, it was just out of control. They could have found another very closely resembling actor to play Walt, but then, you know, they made have just decided to go ahead and leave that one open for the movie franchise. What were his actual gifts? He had a few gifts that were displayed in the backstory in season 1. He had an affinity for animals. They would come to him, which is why a bird flew right into the windshield and the window, and basically committed suicide because it was coming to Walt. Vincent had an incredible affinity for him. He had an affinity for animals. He also had the ability to astrally project. And keep in mind that when the others captured him because they had infertility issues, they realized that they did not have what it takes to raise Walt, because Walt was potentially very dangerous. He had the ability to astrally project. Several people saw him when he was in captivity. Shannon saw him, Locke saw him, several people saw him, dripping wet usually. So that was what his gifts were. They never revisited it, and I'm just assuming that they will someday when the movie series launches.
What was the ultimate deal with Desmond's electromagnetic energy? They didn't really completely deal with that either for me. I mean, what was that? You know, why Desmond really didn't do anything at the end when he went down to the light? So I don't even understand. I know it had something to do with his time travel, etc. I just don't get it. Please help me out.
Now, this question specifically deals with the nature of the island. And the answer is, the island is not natural. If it were, it would not be able to sink, and it would not be able to be moved. I'm not exactly certain what that island is, but it is somehow created by something other than natural forces. Exactly what the island is, we have yet to determine. I personally believe that it is a ship of some sort, and it is powered by electromagnetism. We have to remember that Rose was healed of her cancer by coming to the island. She had been to a healer somewhere in Australia who tapped into power that was at that specific place, but he didn't have what it took to heal her. But Rose was healed, Locke was healed, and so this electromagnetism had the ability to heal, but not the ability to heal everything. Desmond himself was not electromagnetic. He had extreme resistance to electromagnetic energy, which is why he survived the explosion of the hatch at the end of season 2, beginning of season 3, and why he even survived being forcibly exposed to electromagnetism in this season 6. And it was because he had that resistance to electromagnetism that he, and only he, could go down and pull the plug, as it were, on this ship of an island. So that's why this was important. His electromagnetism and his leaving the island is what caused him an incredible sensitivity to the various timelines and time shifting. But in and of itself, he didn't have any great power. It's just that it was the catalyst, as it were.
Okay, this temple that introduced itself this last season, season 6, there were all these new characters that just kind of came and then went. It was sort of a waste of time, if you ask me. They should have been answering questions with that coveted lost time. But what was the deal with these people? Why were they there? Why was this temple built? And by the way, the stewardess from the original plane crash was there. Is that where the people who got stolen by the others in season 3 ultimately went?
Okay, the temple was actually first introduced in season 4 during their time shift flashes, when Jin met Danielle Rousseau and her team. They had gone down, actually they'd followed something which ostensibly was actually the black smoke into the forest, and it went down into a hole. And everyone in the team went down the hole after it, except for Danielle, because Jen prevented her from going down. But when they came back, they all came back crazy, and we have to remember that. They came back crazy, and that is why Danielle killed them all. She's the only one that wasn't exposed to whatever exposed them, they were exposed to. She's the only one that didn't go crazy, and that's why she killed them. And of course, she was left to deliver her child alone and eventually have it stolen by Ben Linus. Then the next time we see the temple was actually in season 5, because Kate Austen took a young Benjamin Linus to Richard to be saved after Said shot young Ben Linus. And so they took Ben to the temple where he was, I'm assuming, submersed into the water, and he was saved. So then finally we come to season 6 and we see the temple again. Now the temple has the ability to save or condemn for the most part. And when they took Said into the water, he was being basically condemned. And that's why he came out evil. Or I think really not evil. He came out basically without a soul, not truly evil. And of course that's what made his final act of courage so redemptive, was, he gave his life to save people that had genuinely loved him, and he genuinely loved. And so that was truly the meat of it. But he had lost his soul somewhere along the line, similarly as Daniel Rousseau's team had lost their souls and became crazy when they were exposed to whatever they were exposed to when they went down the rabbit hole. Now about the second part of your question, who were these people that were at the temple? For all intents and purposes, we don't have any actual knowledge, but because Cindy, the flight attendant, and the 2 children were there, and we know that they were stolen by the others at the beginning of season 3, we know that these people must have been part of the others. We also know that it appears that the others broke into a couple different factions, some living at the temple, which was the only safe place from the black smoke, and some living with Richard and waiting for the return of John Locke. So the others was a much larger group of people than we ever really saw, but it split out into a couple different groups, and that's where that came from.
Okay, the Dharma Initiative, a big part of the show. Who funded them? Was it the American government? And then as early as season 1, somebody's still dropping Dharma Initiative food on the island because, our faithful castaways found these drops. So what's the deal with that? Who's still dropping this food? And ultimately, we don't even really know, other than like a real watered-down backstory of the Dharma Initiative. We don't really know what we need to know.
Okay, now this is where you have to go to abc.com and actually do a little bit of research about what the Dharma Initiative is. The Dharma Initiative was founded by a Finnish foreign exchange student and an American millionaire based in Michigan, which is why when Miles came back to the island in 1977, he had been doing research in Michigan. Now, in 1977 was the event of the great incident, which was where they tapped in to the electromagnetic pocket, and that's why they have to type in the code 4815162342 every 108 minutes, or there would be this huge electromagnetic surge, which of course, as we know, brought down Oceanic Flight 815. So because they had all been killed by the others when Benjamin was about 25 years old. It actually occurred on his birthday. I don't remember which birthday. I'm assuming 25th. But when he was, between 20 and 25 years old, he killed his father. They killed everybody else. The only people that were left from the Dharma Initiative were those that were down in the Swan Hatch. And Dharma knew they couldn't go back, but they continued dropping food onto the island so they could continue having that code punched in every 108 minutes. Of course, we know that Desmond inadvertently killed his partner, and that left him to be doing the job alone, which of course he's not getting any quality sleep this entire time, and Desmond was basically going nuts.
Okay, another question. The first season when the plane crashed, there were all these extra people. You had your primary characters, Kate, Jack, Locke, these kind of people. But then you had all these peripheral characters, all these people that would just be in the background scenes. And then they just up and vanished. I had no idea what happened to them. What happened to these people?
Most of them died in the time flashes where they were shifting times back and forth. At one point they landed at a point in time which was extremely hostile. They were bombarded with a bunch of flaming arrows, this, that, or the other. Most of them died during that, and that's when Sawyer became the de facto leader of the group of Sawyer, Juliet, Miles, let's see, who else was in that group? Miles, Daniel Faraday, Charlotte, Locke. They caught up with Jin eventually because Jin was also time traveling, but he was on his own. Reference the situation with Daniel Rousseau before. And anyway, so most of them died in the time flashes. Charlotte did eventually die because of the time flashes, because of her previous having lived on the island from conception till about age 3, and Miles and Daniel Faraday were also both experiencing more nosebleeds than everybody else because their previous exposure on the island.
Another question was, what was the deal with the water bringing Saeed back to life? They didn't really even explain that. We know that one Saeed came in, another one came out. We even know that there was some sort of pill, so the people at the temple already knew this was some crazy thing, but they didn't explain it.
Okay, please reference my answer about Danielle Rousseau and the temple. Yeah, because it pretty much is right there.
And lastly, although I have millions of these, what was the deal with the back of the plane? Why was that even relevant? Most of the people just got killed anyway. Bernard and Libby are the only ones that made it to the church, and there are all these people in the back of the plane that are just sort of unaccounted for, not explained. I could just go on and on and on and on and on.
Well, as you know, only Libby and Bernard made it to the church at the end. Of course, there was a point where Ana Lucia, who actually busted out Kate, Saeed, and Desmond from, going to county prison. She was cop at that point, and remember, Hurley said, "Is Ana Lucia coming?" And Desmond said, "No, she's not ready." So we do see Ana Lucia. Eventually, one would assume that in one of the new movie franchises, we will actually see a little bit more about Ana Lucia. We don't know. But so one would ostensibly think that in the church, that they visit the church as this collective consciousness multiple times. So not exactly sure. The only reason is remember what Christian said to Jack. The time you spent with these people was the most important time of your life. And so Ana Lucia did not figure as important in Jack's life. Because while, he was somebody that, she was somebody that he knew, he was never really emotionally involved with her like he was with the other people that were there. Anyway, it's a fantastic show, and I hope that this answers a lot of it. Like I said, a lot of this is conjecture and supposition on my part, and I do believe that we're looking in about a year or two to get our first Lost movie. This is our generation Star Trek, and so it's not going away. It's just on hiatus. And that's all I have to say. BK out.